Welcome to this edition of the Million Dollar Mastermind podcast. This is where we pick the brains of high achievers from all walks of life and get their hard-earned, real-world insights on winning. I'm your host, Larry Weidel.
What was the first real shock that you got about the streets are not paved with gold, and when you got into London?
It was difficult to sell pictures. It wasn't that easy.
You open your store now. I wanted to add this.
Not a store, a gallery.
Gallery, excuse me. As you open the gallery and you're leading up to that with all this travel and fairs and everything, you're earning the right to follow your own instincts. You know what I'm saying? You said, I didn't know why I was interested in that style or that whatever. But when you put that much energy into it, you pretty much earn the right to follow your own instincts and pursue the things that you're most interested in. Would you agree with that?
Would you have to just hold that thought for a minute? Because I think the other thing I need to make sort of understand, I'm now running not a family business. I'm running a public company. I think it was over 100 shareholders. I think the number was something like £800,000, which, I'm talking, 30, how many years? I've lost count of how many years ago it is now. That
was a lot of money for you at your stage. Yeah.
Our window is somewhere between 500 and a million, and we raised 800,000. 300,000 on that went on all the setup expenses and the lawyers by the time they dug their fist into it. And everybody. Right. We were left with around £500,000 capital to spend. And that quickly dissipated because I was under an impetus to spend the money because the lawyers and everything, that there were certain strictures for the new schemes. You couldn't just sit on the money, for example. You had to actively show that you were trading. So I was told to, you must go out and buy stock. So I probably ended up buying things that I shouldn't do just because they wanted me to spend the money. And of course, soon you spent the money, we need to be selling now because we're going to run out of money.
Yeah.
It was actually quite tricky. And, and I'd kind of bluffed and blustered my way, in order to raise this money, I had to promote myself as something that at that point, I wasn't actually that person. I hadn't got the experience that I claimed to have got. It was a bit of a puff job. So I had to then demonstrate that, or try to operate in the manner that, and to have the success, rather, that I intimated to everybody would happen. And there were one or two, we had some very fortunate early successes, but then, we went through, the business is very much like this all the time, still to today. So you never know when
feast or famine.
It's feast or famine. It's a feast or famine. Obviously, the big difference is, with all the experience I've gained now 50 years in the art market, you just make sure that you've still got a store covered to live on.
It's kind of like the jewelry business in the sense that you see people sitting in there, nobody coming in, and you're just looking at the walls. And a lot of this is, you'll see that even at art fairs, nobody even comes. You go to an art fair, you go to all the effort that you talked about that you were there, and then you're sitting there for hours and nobody comes by to even look at your stuff. But when you have a brick and mortar operation and you have bills, the electricity, all of that, and day after day, nobody's coming in. But then, it could be one big sale, you're good for the year, the pressure's off. It's a lot like commercial. They used to say commercial real estate would be. It's not like selling houses, which is more steady. But even now the houses are, $20 million in Aspen and Palm Beach. But usually the house business is more smaller and steady. And then the big hits come in on the commercial sales, So if you've got the stomach for it, you go into the commercial side of things. But it's a lot like the jewelry business. It's a lot like the art galleries. But you knew that, didn't you, when you came in?
Yes, I should just go back to the property market. As I had a dear, now deceased close friend of mine who's a real character. And he used to have this joke. He'd say, well, I used to be in real estate. Now I'm just in a real estate.
When you open how did you get sales early on? How did you find your clients? I mean, I'm sure you did announcements coming to town, big opening. And I remember when we had a grand opening for one of our galleries at the first one. And of course, no sales the first night. And I said, why did somebody tell me there's no sales? What one of them said was that, been to many of these, they said, I've never seen anyone sell anything on the grand opening night. And I said, why didn't anybody tell me this? I probably wouldn't have even gone.
Why we, focused on that particular location. The unit is still there today. It became a jeweler's. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's about changed hands again. Albemarle Street is a great cross street from Piccadilly, St James's. You're going to get people drive. It had a fabulous shop window, which again I have today. So you're always fishing for somebody who's never been in the gallery before, who's maybe never looked at these pictures before, who may walk by, drive by, see something in the window or inside the gallery and go, oh my gosh, that looks interesting. And then subsequently comes in the gallery. And then once they're in the gallery, you do your best to promote whatever it is that they've come in to see. And, and you just try to therefore, then to establish some sort of relationship with them. And potentially they might buy the picture. And indeed, only a year ago, almost exactly, a couple had been for dinner at Wilton's, which is just 2 doors down, 3 doors down from us. Been out for dinner, walked by the gallery at night, seen a picture in the window. The wife had liked it. They came in the following day and they bought that and another painting for £500,000.
You find that a lot of your sales are walk-in?
No, I wouldn't say a lot of sales are, but we do.
Right.
We do. It is important. The shop window, the location. I mean, it is a sad fact that many of my colleagues agree when I say this to them, that my gallery now is one of the very last grand old style gallery spaces with a shop front on the main street, dealing in old masters, left not only in London, but arguably in the world. I mean, you've seen what happened in New York. I mean, retail, ground floor retail has virtually disappeared.
How long did it take you to go international? Or when you opened your gallery, what was the first big sale you made?
Well, the first big sale that we made, or invoice number one, was actually, in truth, was made just prior to the opening of the gallery. It was actually to the Tate Gallery in London. One of our first veritable international clients was a man named Bruce Toll, who he and his wife happened to drove by the gallery in their chauffeur-driven limo and saw this very beautiful portrait in the window. And actually, I remember he when he came in the gallery to actually purchase the painting or agree a deal on the painting, he said to me, well, obviously, Mark, I don't know you, but the word on the street is you're a good guy to do business with.
And so you have to wonder who he was talking to so you can reciprocate. Now, how long did it take you to get, how long was it before Margaret Thatcher started buying portraiture from you? I'm just kidding.
You say that, actually. We did sell a few years ago a very early portrait of Henry VIII before he became the icon that we know today in the Holbein portraits, which was bought for 10 Downing Street.
Really?
And actually got a picture hanging over here, which was also hanging. It was the property of Horace Walpole, who was the then Prime Minister in the 18th century, and the painting hung in his wife's drawing room or dressing room in 10 Downing Street.
Your first location in London was not Jermyn Street, right?
It was 1B Albemarle Street, which was the first retail unit, still is, as you turn into Albemarle Street on the right-hand side. And at that point, in those days, in the mid-80s, there were many more galleries in London than there are today.
Yeah.
So there were 2 galleries directly opposite me, and there was probably 4 galleries further up the street. all of which I think have virtually disappeared, sadly, today.
We were getting into how you got into the international market. When you moved to London, was that in the back of your mind of wanting to get into the international? Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, the whole point of moving to London, because when we were in Essex,
right,
we were provincial dealers.
Yeah.
And, our clientele really, we didn't really sell pictures to anybody who lived more than 100 miles away.
Yeah.
Now I'm selling pictures to people who live 10, 15, 20,000 miles away.
Is that from the London location or?
Well, I think it's obviously a combination of absolutely being in London, but obviously by now it's as a result of the reputation of the gallery and the quality of the portraiture and the importance of the portraiture that we now sell.
Have you been able to elevate the quality of the portraiture that you're selling as you've gone along?
And in fact, I was saying this just to my team literally just a couple of days ago. I said that 15, 20 years ago, and we moved into the current location about 20 years ago, if we had one or two really great pictures in the gallery, I'd say that was something, and the rest of the other pictures, though obviously I consider them to be a certain sound stock, were not at that level. In the gallery today, we have probably at least a dozen paintings of international importance.
And you're on Jermyn Street.
Fabulous street.
Yes. Which end of Jermyn Street? Towards Piccadilly or the Ritz?
We're the St. James's end.
Oh, St. James's.
So we're opposite Turnbull and Asser, the famous.
Okay, I was going to ask you about them. Yeah.
And then you've got is it Davidoff's corner? And by the way, Schwarzenegger. Yeah, he was buying cigars just across the road the other day.
Just so people, y'all will know listening, we were Mark and I were talking before we started, and I was nailing down his location on Jermyn Street, and I used to live at Economist Plaza right near Stone's Throw. It's a noisy place at night, Mark. That's why I had to get out of there. It was...
I mentioned Sir John Harvey Jones,
right,
who would have been my father-in-law had I not pulled out of our wedding 4 days beforehand to his daughter, Gabby. Not a great thing to have done. He actually was the chairman of the Economist company.
Really?
Yeah.
And you pulled out on his daughter. How did you expect to ever keep your doors open after that?
Yeah, he didn't speak to me for a year.
What kind of things do you go through? What's the roller coaster like? Like you said, what have you said, if my father only knew what I'd had to go through to keep this gallery going and everything, what is the struggle? Because one way you can look at it, Mark, is here I have paid such a price of traveling and, 14 years or something, doing these shows, doing the, being on the road with the wagon and, beating the bushes and not being at home, living out of suitcases, basically. And so for years, over a decade, and so I paid my dues. And so then I work my way in, I get a storefront. It's like, when is this ever going to end? But the truth of it, it never ends if you want to play in the big leagues. So you're in London, you've got a gallery, you had some big sales. The Tate has bought right off the bat, what could be better as far as a kickoff? But still, you've got to keep your pedal to the metal, get up early, work hard, stay late, that type thing. You never reach a point where you can coast.
I am somebody who works to live rather than lives to work. It's very important for my own psyche to actually be able to switch off and relax and to do the other things in my life that I enjoy. One of the ways that I've been also able to do that, obviously one has to bear in mind you have got to keep a business going, and
right.
Is one of my, and I would say it's a skill set, which has enabled me to get through some of the traumas that I've had to deal with in my working life. I compartmentalize things so that when I go home in the evening, by and large, I'm able to switch off, watch television, listen to music. My great passion at the moment is cooking. So I love to cook, even if I've had a hard day in the gallery. I go home and from a standing start, I'll cook dinner. Now, my wife is trying to change that, and bless her heart, and give her a bit more autonomy in the kitchen. So, in fact, she cooked me dinner last night, which was delicious. Part of this is also, I think, an element of my success. I am admittedly a control freak. I'm very anal about detail, and I like things to be correct and right. Even the sort of smallest things will upset me if it's not quite right. So now you can take that to an extreme where you only end up with even more stress than you need.
Right.
So you've got to learn to sort of balance that to some extent. And one of the things that I've been very fortunate over the last few years is the team that I have now working in the gallery. My wife worked with me. We got married late in life. In fact, we'd only married just over 20 years, which more or less coincided with our occupation of this premises in Jermyn Street. So until a couple of years ago, my wife was our gallery manager. There aren't many people who would ever want to or ever successfully work with their wives so closely in such a narrow space.
Yeah.
But we did establish a very good working relationship. And I freely admit that I wouldn't be or have had the success that we've had, be where I am today, if it wasn't for my wife, who has been an absolute rock, that I've been able to be the creative element that then gone out and done all the magic. I think any successful entrepreneur often needs that rock in which so he doesn't have to worry about the small things.
Right.
And I have, through most of my working life, had to worry about the little things.
Yeah.
As we talked about earlier, even when I moved to London, there would be moments where I nearly went bankrupt in the early 90s, and I only had one member of staff, had to let them go. I had to sell my car, was literally a paper's width away from being closed down.
Thanks for listening to the Million Dollar Mastermind. If you felt there were any valuable takeaways from this episode, please take a minute and leave us a 5-star review. Your feedback is important and really helps us get the word out to a wider audience. Remember, we have a valuable webinar that is absolutely free. Register for it right now at weidelonwinning.com. Thanks for listening.